If you're just joining us, welcome to Rebuilding Refugee Resettlement webinar hosted by Inspiritus. We're awfully glad to have you, and if you'd like, as you enter, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, and we'd love to have a record of who's with us. So my name is John Moeller. I'm the president and CEO of Inspiritus, and if you're new to Inspiritus, you may recognize us. We changed our name 2 years ago. It was Lutheran Services of Georgia, and we merged with Lutheran Services in Tennessee, and Inspiritus was born in the process. So I'm the CEO, and I am joined by Ame Zangandu, our Director of Refugee and Immigrant Services, and it's a real delight to be able to bring you good news today. It's been a season of austerity and challenge for the refugee program across our country over the last 4 years. And we come to you today because we believe and are excited about the opportunity to grow and rebuild the refugee resettlement program across the country, and particularly right here in your hometown of Savannah. Savannah is a port city. Savannah was one of the first cities in America to welcome newcomers. In fact, it's a city built by newcomers and by immigrants. And so a port city, and you have a long heritage of offering hospitality to newcomers, to strangers, to immigrants. And so thank you for that heritage, for your participation with us. If you're new to Inspiritus, hopefully today you'll learn a little bit about our work, and you'll get certainly to meet some of the stars of our program. So we'll advance the slide, and we'll get started with our mission. Inspiritus guides individuals and families on a path from surviving to thriving. And that's important to note because there are many different people across our footprint, which you can see there on your screen, stretches far and wide, who have experienced some form of trauma and are in need of someone to come alongside them and offer them encouragement and strength, and help them harness their own strength. So that's what we do, and that's what we do with immigrants and refugees. And so I'm going to introduce you to Ame, and we'll do that by virtue of a video. If you're like me, you may be having a hard time hearing.
My family was in the middle of the chaos. We lived in the capital, and that's where everything started. April 6, 1994. and that's the day that if you're Rwandan, you will never forget that day. That's when the airplane carrying the Burundian and Rwandan prisoner was shot down. That's ultimately what fueled the genocide. My mom was missing for a whole week. We didn't know where she was. We've seen people dying left and right, and we didn't have any hope that she would come back home. So when she came back home, that's when we decided that was time to leave. We haven't had the realization that we're never gonna go back until probably in a refugee camp. When you sit down and finally look behind and you count how many family members that you've lost, you count how many friends that didn't make it, that you finally say, oh my God, this is it. We need to look forward to what's next. We need to look to rebuilding our lives. And that's exactly what happened with my family. It didn't click in until we were sitting in a refugee camp in Congo and realized that we probably never may go back. Every week, my dad will come from work and he will stop at the UN just to go ask what the process is. And it was the same way. He just stopped by and asked them. And he finally passed by and they're like, oh yeah, you need to pack your things. You leave in 3 days. And he went to Georgia. That's how it happened. That when he came home and told us, we thought he was kidding. We thought he was kidding. My mom had to get up and then go verify because we thought he was kidding. He just didn't want to face us anymore. So she got up and was like, oh, it's true. They confirmed that we actually live in 3 days. They told us that we're going to Atlanta, to Georgia. We didn't know anyone. We knew where Atlanta was on the map because at this time it's 1997 and the Olympics had just happened in 1996. So we've heard of where Atlanta is. We heard in the news, but we had no idea. Yeah, I mean, we didn't know anything about Georgia. We didn't know anyone. And we said yes. Sometimes people talk to me and they want to hear my story. And I usually say, oh, wow, that's incredible. You didn't speak in English when you came. You didn't know this, you didn't know that, and look what you're doing. I want to say that my story is not unique. I want to say that there are probably hundreds of MA somewhere out there. You just need to meet them. You just need to get to know a refugee and know their story, because my story is not unique. I'm unique, but the refugee story is not unique. I enjoy so much working with refugees and just empowering them and being that voice who tells them that, yes, I did and you can do it.
Wow, what a powerful story, and to think that it is not that unique of a story. I failed to mention that inspiritus is actually a Latin word, and it actually has a meaning, and it means to fill with courage or strength of purpose, or to fill with the Spirit. And it is the stories of the refugees that we've served over the last 40 years who inspire us and fill us with courage. And hopefully that's something we can do for others as well. So we have the expert with us today, MA, and welcome, MA, to this webinar. And tell us a little bit about resettlement in the United States and what kind of history we have here in Georgia.
Yes, no, thank you. It's great to be here talking to every one of you, and thank you for attending on a rainy Thursday morning. It's already here where I'm sitting, and I hope that everybody is safe where you are. And I want to say that this webinar is being recorded, so it can be shared with those who could not participate today. So yes, I don't even know where to start by talking about resettlement in the United States. Obviously, you said I export, and I want to say I'm an expert by the virtue of being a refugee and also doing this work. So it's something that I enjoy doing so much. But really, to summarize the resettlement in Georgia, it was, first of all, I trust that people on this webinar probably know who a refugee is, but it's worth saying that refugees really are people who cannot go back home. They are fleeing for their lives. They are fleeing the conflicts, violence, genocide, or persecution based on a number of things, based on race, political affiliates, you name it. It's just not safe for them to stay in their home country. And the resettlement was put in place by the Refugee Act of 1990. It was signed on March 17th, 1980. So yesterday, it was celebrating the 41 years of anniversary of this Refugee Act. And it put in place, it was a bipartisan response to the crisis that was happening in 1980s. And it has put in the infrastructure that is a combination of the federal and also the community, the local community that welcomes refugees. So we call it, it's a public-private partnership. And really that's how it works. In Georgia, and is a proud participant to that program, and it's actually one of the best really in the US, by virtue that it has a very successful self-sufficiency rate, and people are really working within 6 months of arriving in the US in Georgia at really higher rates. I think almost 90% of them are working with 6 months of arrival. And I also want to mention that refugees do come with, they have permission to go to work right away as soon as they hit the ground. They get a green card or permanent residency at 1 year, and they can apply for citizenship after 5 years.
Thanks, M.A. Yeah. And, obviously there is a worldwide crisis that is that we here in America are responding to. And but before I ask you the next question, I would like to invite our participants to also record your questions in the chat. So there's an opportunity at the end, and maybe even as we go along, we'll try and answer some questions that you may have about the refugee program, about our work in the greater Savannah area. So please, as you introduce yourself in the chat, please record your questions as we go along, and we'll try our best to answer those during the meeting, during the webinar today. So, M.A., talk to us a little bit about the global crisis that America has a responsibility to respond to.
Yeah, the need has never been greater today than today, really. We're seeing the highest refugee crisis in terms of numbers, really, in the history of the world. Today you have, we say 26 million, it's documented, but now it's risen to 28 million refugees worldwide. And we have almost double that, almost 46 million internally displaced people. And those are people who have left their home, but they are still within the home country. They have not crossed an international border. So they call it internally displaced, but those, once they cross the border, then they become refugee asylum seekers. But those are really high numbers. And we have 2.2 million asylum seekers. That means that they have crossed the country and they're in the process of seeking safety into another country. Just statistically, I just put here for fun facts, well, maybe not fun facts, but it's that every minute we have about 20 people who are displaced, 20 people who are out of their home because it's no longer safe for them to stay.
So, M.A., obviously there is this worldwide problem, and we get to be a part of the solution here at Inspiritus, and frankly, everyone on the call gets to be a part of the solution. Tell us a little bit about the work of Inspiritus with respect to refugees and resettlement and how it works. How did Inspiritus get connected to this work?
Yes, so we do this work in partnership with Ritania Immigration and Refugee Service. It's a national organization. There are 8 of them in the U.S. That work with the U.S. State Department, and those national organization has local affiliates like us. So we are an affiliate of the Ritania Immigration Refugee Service, and we get to do the work on the ground. So they work with the State Department, and we are and they just send people as they see fit based on language. Maybe they have a family here, but it's a partnership that the infrastructure that allows us to do this work. And really, the goal is to just to welcome new Americans and help them navigate the system and see that they successfully integrated into their new communities.
Yeah, I think the stunning statistic you mentioned a few minutes ago that still always catches me by surprise is that something like 93% of the refugees that we
Yes.
have the good fortune, 91% of the folks that we get to work with end up being self-sufficient, paying their bills over a 6-month period. Amazing. And that's a tribute, obviously, to our work, but it's a tribute to those that we get to work with, right? I mean, they are resilient, they're strong, and they're dedicated to the process.
Yeah, very much so. They are, I think the first thing they ask, when can I go to work? But after the kids go to school, the next thing is like, okay, now can we go to work? So it's amazing. They're definitely resilient and eager.
One of the questions that I hear a lot, MA, and maybe others on the webinar here get periodically is, how do refugees get, how do they get selected? Obviously it's by invitation, and our State Department welcomes a certain number every year. So talk to the group a little bit about what the process entails. Obviously it's complicated, but boil it down to it for the key points.
It's very complicated, and I can try to really go through that, but we have a little video. And I can talk a bit more about the process that really shows what that process looks like. It's very quick, and I'm sure there'll be questions, but let's watch that little video, and then we can discuss more in depth.
Yeah, that really is a great video of the process. What would you like to elaborate on about that process?
And I see someone in the chat, what is the vetting process for these families to enter the United States? And, I see that we're putting a really lengthy answer in the chat as well. But, as you see in the video, they are probably, refugees are the most vetted group of immigrants to enter the United States. So we have 5 federal agencies, FBI, DHS, the State Department, that are vetting refugees once they get to that stage before they enter the United States. And if at any point they have doubts or your story doesn't add up, you simply don't get to come. Then only 1% of refugees worldwide are given a chance to apply through the refugee resettlement, and 50% of that 1% are able to pass the security screening and be able to come. So it's very, very thorough.
1%. And where, here in Georgia, where do those 1% come from? As we boil it back down to what happens here in the greater Savannah area.
Yes, so that 1% is coming, well, through the refugee resettlement in Georgia, we are, there's, the majority are coming from really 16 countries, but it really boils down that the majority of those 16 countries, they are Afghanis from Afghanistan. And those individuals have worked with the U.S. government in Afghanistan, and now, and because for the sole purpose of working in the U.S. government, their lives are in danger. So they are given a special visa, immigrant visa, to come to the U.S., same categories as refugees. And also we've seen many refugees from the Democratic Republic of Congo. That's the second categories of people that we've been seeing being welcoming to Georgia, and some other, Guatemala, Indian, Iran, from Rwanda, South Sudan, and much slower number. And if you can see to the right here, we put globally the refugee numbers, and you can see that Syria is at the top of the list with over 6 million. And we really haven't welcomed many Syrians in the past 4 years, just because of the policies that have been put in place. But generally speaking, in Georgia, we've seen, we're serving people from those 16 countries, with the majority of them being from Afghanistan, Burma, and Congo.
And MA, we don't do this work in isolation, right? I mean, we have great partners across the state. If you don't mind, spend a minute telling us who's also involved in this work, and however, and what does it look like, particularly in Savannah?
Yes, so we have 4 resettlement agencies doing the work in Georgia. We used to have a 5th one that closed last year or 2 years ago, World Relief. So we have Catholic Charities of Atlanta, Spiritas, of course, and International Rescue Committee in Atlanta, and New American Pathways. And we're very proud to say and to do this work in Savannah as well. So Spiritas is the only agency that have the Refugee Resettlement Program outside of the Metro Atlanta. And Savannah have been so welcoming. And we're talking about self-sufficiency rates in Georgia. I think Savannah has like 100% self-sufficiency rate, it really by 3 months. So it's been a very welcoming community, and we're very, very eager to keep that tradition going.
Yeah, it's a real honor to get to work in Savannah, because Savannah does do such a great job of welcoming.
Absolutely.
So, I think you started the conversation by talking about the Refugee Act of 1980 and the bipartisan support for this program in Congress and around the country. And obviously, I think it would be wonderful to share with the group, how many refugees have come to the U.S. over that period of time. I'm not sure we have all that detail, but here's a slide.
We put it together.
A lot, look at those numbers up back in 1981, over 200,000 refugees. And then you see it bumps around, but it really, what's the average refugees that we typically welcome in the U.S.?
Yeah, so the average really has been 95,000 refugees per year. And it's worth noting that for the past 4 years, the former administration have put a lower cap for refugees to come. And this is what we call a presidential determination. Every year, usually around late summer, September, because the fiscal year of the program is October 1st. The president will set a ceiling. It's a ceiling that it's a cap of how many refugees that could enter the United States. And you know, I mean, we put all the numbers here, but for fiscal year 2021, which is this one that we're working on, the cap have been set to the lowest since 1980. Right now it's at 15,000 refugees for 2021. Prior to that, in 2020, the year that we just finished, it was 18,000. And before that, it was, I think it was 30,000. So it have gone down. And this is really why we are talking about rebuilding. We're talking about rebuilding because, you know, you can't have a program if you don't have refugees to welcome, if refugees are not coming in. So we're talking about rebuilding because, you know, not trying to get ahead of my time, but because the new administration has promised to bring in commitment to this program, a commitment to rebuilding the refugee resettlement, and we are very, very eager, and it's a policy that we very so much welcome.
Yeah, May, and I think it's really important that everyone on the webinar today understand that presidents actually make a real difference on the refugee program. It's one of the few programs, few social service programs in America that the presidential administration actually has a lot to say about how big the program is or how small it is. And so if you hear us talking about one president or another president, it's not necessarily because we like or dislike them, but it's because they have the power to determine the number, right? And yes. And so so let's turn our attention then. Obviously, we've got this historical slide, but let's talk a little bit about where we're heading. You talked about the future, and talk to us a little bit about what the Biden administration is signaling to those of us who are involved in this work.
Yes, so the Biden administration have said that they're committed to rebuilding the Refugee Resettlement Program, and you know, he have passed an executive order. Really, I think it was actually day 2 when he took office, just committing to rebuilding the program. And part of the rebuilding the program is setting a higher presidential determination, so higher than 15,000. And that was part of the executive order as well. I want to say that, you know, his commitment is there, the executive order is there. However, we are still working on the ceiling of 15,000. He's committed to put it higher, and we are waiting for that to happen. So we're really dreaming big, and we are rebuilding. However, until he puts, you know, the pen on it and sign that president's determination, we you know, things can change. So we are eager and been asking when the new PD will come. And also part of the new administration is really to look at the former administration policies that have been passed, and you know, those that are harmful to the program, to the refugee program, will be looked at. We have you know, hundreds really policies, you know, the public charges, so many other things that was not refugee friendly. And the administration is looking at that, and they're also looking for the, you know, referral pathway, if you can call it, to take in or vet or be taking new referrals for refugees through the United Nations, because we know that has been halted in the past few years. So that is his commitment, and we're looking forward to for that to come to fruition.
and really, in many respects, whatever we did would be preliminary until the President of the United States signs a presidential determination setting a new cap. And it's our hope, sincere hope, that that number will be well above 100,000 refugees across the country. But then, as I heard you say earlier, the process has to restart, both abroad, the vetting process, which has almost completely come to a halt. And at the same time, capacity has to be rebuilt inside the United States. Because as we're gonna share now with our participants, you're gonna see some stark figures in the next slide. So let's look at how the refugee numbers have really slowed to a trickle.
Yes. So talking about the presidential determination, the Biden administration has said that they're going to set the ceiling to 62,500, moving it for 15,000 that we have right now. And going forward for 2022, he's committed to 125,000. So we know that it's going to be building progressively to allow for infrastructure, also for the UN abroad to put in place to vet more refugees. But to bring it down to Savannah, though, like what those numbers mean for Savannah. So only 5 refugees have arrived in Savannah in 2021. And that has to do with just a low refugee cap numbers. Once it trickles into the communities, if the PD, the presence of nation is really low, of course, the communities, you don't get to welcome as many. So only 5 so far. It's a family that came about a month ago. To Savannah, and we know that the COVID, has contributed to even lower number of refugees. So, but it's really, this lower number has been because of the ceiling of 15,000. In 2020, just last year, same thing. We only welcomed 5 refugees to Savannah, and we just put numbers for the past several years, so you can see when we're talking about rebuilding, what can that look like? I know that Savannah has the capacity to welcome more refugees, and at the peak of 2000, that was for the peak. That's I think where we welcomed more refugees than before in 2016. We reached three figures. We reached 100 refugees, and that is really what we aspire to. To us, that's not the ceiling, really. That is what we hope to do, and of course, we can welcome more than 100. But as we talk about rebuilding, we hope that we go back to welcoming 100, if not more, refugees in the Savannah area. For this year, once we have a new PD signed, we hope that the physical year really have only 6 months left. We only have until September 30th, and we hope to at least have welcomed with the 62,500 nationwide refugees come to the US. We hope that Savannah will at least get to welcome between 50 and 70 refugees by September. So going from 5 to 60 or 70 is a lot, but we have dedicated staff in Savannah and dedicated community really in Savannah who are ready to welcome them.
Yeah, and this next slide really talks about the limbo that we're living in, right? Between presidential administrations. It was just a matter of a few weeks ago that in a rush of euphoria, we began to get, the phone started ringing, right? And we started hearing that refugees were coming, and we started doing all the things that we do to prepare, getting ready to meet people at the airport, getting apartments ready for families to occupy. And in fact, if many of you are wondering, where are the refugees? What happened? And so essentially, President Biden has not yet signed the new presidential determination. He has signaled that the new cap would be 125,000. But at this point, he has not actually put his signature on that letter. And until that happens, refugees are still working under the former president's presidential determination of 15,000. And so, flights have been, the vetting process that got started has had to be slowed down. Flights have been canceled, and all of us on this webinar have been really put in limbo. I guess what I want to share with everybody, and I imagine you do too, is that we still remain very hopeful that this will be signed and we'll get back to welcoming a lot more refugees across Georgia and in Savannah particularly, and frankly building a staff back. I mean, we've really been reduced to a skeleton staff, and yet I'm just profoundly grateful that we still have a staff, that we still have a presence in Savannah, because it would have been, it was touch and go there, I think, for a little while. As we, is there anything you'd like to add before we move along?
I'd like to say that with waiting for the new presidential nomination to be signed and talking about the flight being canceled, we know that the people who were ready to travel were priorities that have family members here. So we're talking about people joining their family members, people, like family members here who have been waiting for years for their families to come, and to be told that they're coming next week and they have to call them, few days prior to the flight getting here, that it's been canceled. It has been really, really hard. And we hope that the new presidential nomination is signed really soon.
And that really just, if we could urge any of you on the webinar today, all of you, we'd like you to let your voice be heard. I mean, we are a democracy here in America, and our elected officials listen to those that they govern. And we'd like to urge all of you to urge President Biden to sign that presidential determination, and to fulfill his promise of welcome to 125,000 refugees. And on the next slide, you're actually going to, there's a link, and we can put it in the chat as to how to sign on to a faith organizations and faith leader letter that will be delivered to the president. But we really urge you, it's important that the president hear from people on the ground who are involved in this work, who care about this work. And so this is your opportunity to not only, be in waiting, but to take some action that will hopefully get this program ramped up and moving forward here rapidly. May, what would you add?
I don't think there's really anything to add. We put in the chat those opportunities, and if you like to be part of it, please, please do so. If you have questions or haven't done it, or you're kind of wondering how it works, please reach out to us, to myself, to John. Anybody that inspires us can guide you through how to do that. But I think that, people listen and our voice is very powerful. And while we think that is very small act, it's not small at all. So we encourage you to do that.
Yeah, thanks, MA. So if you noticed in the chat, there was the link. So we're going to make it easy for you. All you got to do is click on that link and make sure your voice is heard. There are other opportunities here to join the Refugee Council's USA Refugee Advocacy Days coming up in April as well. At this point, I think we're going to hear from State Senator Kim Jackson, who has a message for us.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to celebrate New Americans Day here in the state of Georgia. In my district, District 41, there are hundreds of people who have been resettled as refugees, people who faced war and torture, religious persecution, people who had to flee because of their sexual orientation or simply because of their political views. From refugee camps to our great state, we have welcomed thousands of new Americans here in Georgia. Whether you live in Dade County or Rabun, from Seminole County to Camden and everywhere else in between, there are new Americans living in your districts and in your counties. They are teachers and pastors. They are farm workers. They are first responders. They are so much. 1/3 of every business on a main street is owned by someone who is foreign born in this great state of Georgia. 1/10 of all Georgians were born somewhere else outside of these United States. On this day, I celebrate the contributions of those who were not born here, but who have called Georgia home now. And in a little while, we'll have an opportunity to pass a bill that will allow us to study those contributions further. And I ask that you all will consider that, because I know from my own district that the contributions to our economy are many because of those who have found refuge here in our state. On this day, I celebrate and I salute all of our new Americans. Thank you.
Awesome. Kim is a powerful advocate at the in the state Senate. And at this time, I'm going to ask Aimee to just describe to you all what the long welcome looks like in Savannah to refugees. What are the components to a great refugee program that has the intended effects that we're intending, Aimee?
So I'll go through this really quickly, but sometimes I get questions like, and since we only have like five refugees last year and 5 here, people wondering, what we're doing in Savannah. So the reception and placement is the refugee resettlement, which is, 90 days. We do have a matching grant, which is an employment self-sufficiency program, helping people get that first job in the U.S. We're partnering with Savannah Takes for the English as second language. And we have a very successful after-school program working with the teachers in the school and the parents to make sure that the kids are being successful in the school. And we have a social adjustment and employment, working with people up to 5 years. So if they lose that first job that they got through the matching grant program, they can come back to us and get an upgrade or second job. And on the next slide, to answer your question, really, what is it that we do and what is the long welcome looks like? And it's really it's getting them from the airport, right? Making sure that they're being integrated successfully into the new program. So there are a series of services, of course, what we call resettlement, and it starts with even before they get here. It starts with making sure that they have a safe and affordable housing. So we're working with partners in Savannah who allow us to lack a little bit of the process of securing housing and just have an apartment set up and everything prior to getting to them arriving here. So, we go to the airport, we give them an extensive cultural orientation, and it's really, it's a new different community, new culture, new laws. So we really break it down for them, on how to be safe, or abiding by the new community's established standards, really. And we put the kids in school, we register adults into English language, we give them a social security card, the ID, Georgia ID, so they can be ready to go to work. We help them navigate the very hard healthcare system that we have in this country. So it takes really a while to make sure that they know how to get to the PCP, the kids immunization, and that, if they get sick, what to do. And of course, to have after school and, working with the kids to make sure that, they come here speaking English, and they just need hands-on to make sure that they're successful. And of course, we work to secure them a job. So that's in a nutshell, that's the long welcome. But the long welcome goes away beyond really the 90 days. It goes away beyond the 1 year and 2 years. and we really want to be here for them so they can come back if they need help, something's not working right, so they can match them with a community member, with an employer, someone who can show them around and make sure that they have the resources, the community resources to be integrated to the new community.
Yeah, and this slide's a great example of how it takes an entire community to help integrate people into community. And in fact, that's our mission, is making sure that everyone we serve is a contributing member of the community. And imagine the way this must feel. And May, you remember how this is like drinking from a fire hose. We call it the long welcome, but it's a lot that refugees go through, and our commitment is a lot to ensure that folks have the tools they need to succeed here in America. We've got some big challenges as an organization and as a community to rebuild the refugee program. Talk to us a little bit about what those challenges are.
Yes, so talking about rebuilding, really the challenge has been that, so we like you mentioned something to like, oh, we're so glad that we still have staff to do this work. Yes, it's a reduced staff. We all has learned how to do more than one job. We learn how to set up an apartment. We learn how to do cultural orientation. We learn how to call employers and talk to them about hiring these refugees. So we're hiring, and we hope that we bring on those specializations that we lost in the past, and really that's the biggest hurdle that we have to meet. And so we're making new partners. We're talking to those apartment complexes that have rented to refugees before. We have actually employers really, they're ready to get refugees to work. We get phone calls every day about, when are you getting a new family, anybody looking for a job. So we're hiring, we're bidding partners, and we're hoping to bring in also new partners to help us welcome refugees as well. I'm gonna go to the, let's see what we have. So, the challenge is really, of course, we talk about the pre-term termination, if that's not signed, we can't welcome more refugees. And we all know about the challenges of COVID-19, doing everything social distance safely. That's another added challenge that we need to meet, and that we have been meeting. When we talk about refugees, only have been 5. I mean, we have hundreds of refugees that have come in the past 5 years. So we've been working, those refugees have been here to make sure that they know how to do the unemployment claim, that they have, housing, that they can access rental assistance, things to that extent. So we've been busy, but we hope to be busy welcoming more refugees now. And housing is a challenge just because it's a trust, and we have apartment complexes that don't know refugees, and that we have to convince that, trust me, they're going to go to work within 3 months, they're going to pay their own rent and things like that. So all the other digital divide, everything being done digitally now, the kids being in school, at home, and having equipment and functioning internet to access that. Those are the things that we're also looking forward to. Let's see if we can get to the next slide. But that's the challenge that we're addressing right now. And probably you had one more question for me, I think, on.
Well, no, I just think that, we as staff can only do so much, right? That it really does take rebuilding. When we think of rebuilding this program in each community, it really means tying the partners back together, reaching back out, rebuilding those networks that, have not been nurtured as well as we would like, just due to the fact that there's been no staffing, very little staffing. I like to say we've had the pilot light on over the last 12 to 24 months, and have been grateful to be able to respond when the phone rings with refugees coming. But this is a tremendous time to start to rebuild those partnerships and the volunteer component there in Savannah. And I think that this is where we have an opportunity to hear from Sarah Burke about what it means to volunteer and how volunteers.
Before we talk to Sarah, we do have a guest here joining us, Ahmad. he's, I don't know, Ahmad, if you on. Yes, you on. If you can just share a little bit. Yes.
I'm on now.
And Ahmad is a staff member here in Atlanta, and we invited him to just share a little bit of his story. I know, well, I don't want to give too much ahead of time. I just want to give him a few minutes to just talk a little bit about himself.
Okay, good morning, everybody. First of all, thank you, MA, for introducing me. And second, I give a title to my journey from Afghanistan to USA, and the title is The Smile I Like. Before I say something
and I'm
about
sorry, I should say Dr. Ahmad.
Yes.
Don't let me forget that, because you don't want us to say it when we're working, but yeah, he's a doctor, and I won't give too much about your information.
Yeah, before I say something about my journey from Afghanistan to USA, it's important to talk for a few minutes about my life in Afghanistan. So after 9/11, the US attacked Afghanistan on October 2001 and removed Taliban from power. It's just the time that I have graduated from medical university around 2002. I got married, fresh graduate, looking for a job, finally moved to Kabul, the capital of Afghanistan, to get a job. I got it in work in a medical field for a while as a doctor, but the salary was very low and it's hard to live with it. On the other hand, the new era of democracy and rapid changes in all aspects of life, like health, education, governance, community development, media, women, and etc. in Afghanistan made educated people to move and change their fields for better and best positions and high salaries, and I was one of them. I started working with different NGOs and then with UN, UNDP, USAID funded project, which basically supported the mission of US government in Afghanistan. So life is good, more money, car, and home. But after a decade, Taliban is back in force in controlling the rural areas, highways, and finally threatened individual who was working with US military and US project and programs. I was the one receiving threat. And finally, I took it seriously when they threatened my family, especially my daughters. I applied for SIV program and got my visa and came to USA in August 26, 2014. We ended up in Tallahassee, Florida. No family members, no friends, and no one from Afghanistan. A mobile home, 3 small bedroom, 1 bed, not a good neighborhood. So the resettlement agency was not helpful as the ones here in Georgia. I was a bit depressed, but keeping my morale high and strong for my family. I have to find a job because I have to pay all these bills and rents after a few months. I printed my resume and walked around the small city of Tallahassee and gave it to different stores. The next Friday, I went to mosque and distributed my resume to people. And the next Sunday, I went with one of my Iraqi friends who was immigrated from Iraq to the church and gave it to people in the church. I was waiting for a call. A man called me after 2 days and told me, I have a grocery store in downtown. Do you want to work with me as a cashier? I told him yes, but I don't know how to operate the register. And he told me, I will train you. Deal is done. The next day I went and I got a job for $10 an hour. It was hard for me, a medical doctor with MBA degree, and a regional director for a multi-million-dollar project in Afghanistan. And now you have to mop the floor when you close your shift. One day I came late to home and my wife was sick, and I took her to hospital, and I took all my 3 children with me because no one was in home to take care of them. We have that night in a hospital, and the next day I went to work. So it was a tough life. Long story short, we decided and moved to Georgia because we have few relatives here, and my life and our life started getting better. I joined Inspiritus as an employment specialist. My job is to find jobs for refugees. The job, I love it. One day I took clients to Marshall Distribution Center and they did interviews and hired. I was driving on my way back to office. I saw a young man standing in front of Marshall door and shaking his hand to me and yelling at me. I stopped my car and he came close to me and told me, I'm a refugee and I am looking for a job and I came here to get a job. I looked to him, he was hopeless. And I told him, it's not how Marshall hire people. You have to go online and apply. And he told me, I don't know how to apply. He walked 7 miles from his home to Marshall that day to get a job. I brought him to my office. I applied for him to Marshall and I drove him back to his home. Next week, he did an interview and he got a job. And when I met him, he smiled. That is the smile I like. And I saw that smile on many faces. And that's my great motivation, keeping me working for refugees. So as a closing remark, I want to say, if you feel the pain of others, when you had the same pain in your life, it's sympathy and you get comfort with it. But if you feel the pain of others and you do not have it in your life, it's kindness. And it's the highest quality in life. Thanks a lot and may God bless you all.
Ahmed, thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for the resilience and strength you bring, the encouragement you are to future refugees, and it's amazing. We are approaching an hour, and we've covenanted with you all for an hour, and we've got a few other items to share with you, but we've also got some questions that we want to make sure we take some time to answer. And so the person kind of behind the webinar today is Rebecca Butcher, and Rebecca and we've got Sarah Burke, who has some information about volunteering to add. We've got some questions. Becca, where would you like for us to go next as we bring this in for a landing?
Well, I think we've answered a few questions in the chat, but I think there are some questions that would be helpful for you, John and Amy, to answer. One of the questions posed at the beginning of the webinar was, when will the Savannah office be reopened?
Oh, okay, that was a question. So the Savannah office have never closed. It has not closed. It is open. And we have Ritania, I saw your beautiful picture here. I don't know if you can just turn on your camera so people can see you. Ritania is the Refugee Services Coordinator in Savannah. And she's there. The office is open. Reach out and ask us what's happening. You know, even while we didn't have any refugees coming, we were serving refugees, like those who have been in Savannah for a while through, you know, other changes that they have. So, but it is open. It is open, and we're there. There you go. Ritania and Doa, they are the two staff that we have in Savannah right now. So we are open.
And just to add to that, Amy, we are open, but by appointment.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes, please call me and let me know if you want to meet me at the office, and I will be there.
We're open virtually and in person
Yes,
as needed.
definitely.
Thanks, Tanya.
And
Becca,
also,
yeah.
Amy, another person posed the question, what were the top 3 things you needed when you first arrived as a refugee?
I'm so sorry, what are the 3 things that I needed?
The top 3 things that you needed when you first arrived.
Me as a teenager or as a family in general? Me, myself, as a 17 years old, I desperately needed to learn English. And I needed to make friends. And also at 17, I really wanted to go to work. And I did get my first job. It was at Walmart, 6 months after arrival. So those are the 3 things. If you ask my dad or my parents, they say job was number 1.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're right at 11 o'clock. I'd like to take this chance to thank each of you for joining us, and really want to urge you to reach out to that link about the presidential determination. Make sure your voice is registered and heard. And secondly, I'd like to thank our panel, and Ame, Ritania, Ahmed, Sarah Burke, Becca Butcher, who is the mastermind behind this webinar. Please reach out to us if you have follow-up questions. If we didn't get to your question, we'd like to stay in touch. You have contacts here on this slide. Becca and Ame, will this presentation be available? How will the recording be accessed?
Yes, we will be recording this, or it is recorded, and we hope to share it on Facebook, and we'd also happy to send a follow-up email to anyone who registered or wasn't able to make it. And I noticed in the chat that many of our volunteers are being so encouraging. And if you have a moment to stay and are interested, I'd love to give Sarah the opportunity to just tell people how they could get involved as a volunteer and what our needs are right now.
Great. Why don't we just go right to that, Becca? For those who are able to stay on, we have Sarah Burke with us to share a little bit about volunteering. Otherwise, we'll let the rest of you sign off, and thanks again for being with us.
Yes, we have a pretty strong volunteer workforce in Savannah, which we're so grateful for, just the champions that are there. But we continually need more people, especially the more that we're resettling, the more volunteers we're going to need. So to volunteer, you really don't need anything special. If you speak English, you have a little bit of time, you can volunteer. Anywhere from an hour a week, on up, depending on what you're interested in. But really, even if you have an hour in a week, we could use it for volunteering. Our volunteer process includes an application online that just tells us a little bit more about you, and puts you in our system and gets it where I can communicate with you electronically. We do a background check for all of our volunteers, so you need to submit that. And then completing a volunteer orientation. These days we're doing that virtually. I have a version of it recorded. I'm also doing live sessions virtually, depending on how many people we have interested. And the orientation actually goes over a lot of what we've gone over here. Who are refugees? Where are they coming from? What do they need? And how you can help in an efficient way. Our biggest need in Savannah right now is for virtual after-school tutors. We're opening up tutoring on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday from 4:30 to 6:30. And we have from first grade to sixth graders, depending on the day. We're not exactly sure who's going to show up or what they're going to need. But we love to pair our students with some volunteers that can help them walk through some homework. During that time, that's really when you can connect and just remind them, like, you're not alone. This is really hard. And especially this virtual learning, the pandemic, it's a place for you to connect and be empathetic and say, it's not just affecting you, it's affecting us too. We're in this together. We're gonna do this. You're not alone. So I think there's so much more that happens in that time, that virtual tutoring time, than just helping solve math problems. Although that is really important. You can be working on conversational English with them. And a lot of our students don't have parents who are fluent enough in English to be able to assist with their homework or understand what their instruction is at school. And so for a child to have someone to come to and say, can you explain this to me? And while I'm at it, can I ask you about this other thing, is really important. So we're primarily doing virtual volunteering right now. We hope as the vaccine is more readily available and people are getting vaccinated or have had COVID and are immune and are comfortable meeting in person, and as we start resettling refugees, we're going to start meeting and volunteering in person. But right now we're focused on our virtual volunteer opportunity, and that happens Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday from 4:30 to 6:30.
Awesome.
Sarah,
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, in the chat, there was a quick question, but I think it might be helpful to know, how long are the volunteer background screenings valid? So if someone is looking to re-engage, what does that look like?
2 years. They're valid for 2 years.
Thank you, Sarah.
And our after-school program, Ritania is you met her, you saw her face there, you see her face there. She is the staff person who oversees that program, and
Yes.
you're not alone. If you choose to get involved as a volunteer in this role, you'll have the guidance of Ritania.
Great. Do you have any other questions, Becca, that we can answer? I know it's already 11. And if you didn't get to a question, maybe can you get back to the person who asked the question if you had the information?
I believe we were able to answer all of the questions either in the chat, but please do not hesitate to reach out to us if you have any additional questions or there's any way we can help you get connected.
Great.
Well, this concludes our presentation. Aimee, thank you for sharing. Sarah, Ahmad, Ritania, we didn't get to meet Doa, but if you haven't met her, she's amazing. She's our employment specialist there in Savannah. So, and Becca, again, thank you for the behind the scenes work, and thank you to all of you. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.